Today we have a great little chunk from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, which Paul uses as his treatise on resurrection, and almost more interestingly, his treatise against the notion that there is no resurrection. Specifically today we're going to look at verses 32 and 33, but let's think about that chapter for a moment. He says some things in the chapter such as, if there is no resurrection of the dead, then Christ isn't raised. And if Christ isn't raised, we're still dead in our sins. And that means our preaching is pointless, it's futile, and we are to be pitied above all men. So, pardon me. So Paul wants his hearers, his readers, to know that the resurrection is such a critically core component to Christianity that without it, they're worse off than when they were found to begin with. Without a resurrection, this is happy talk that leads you to the same place as never having heard it would. So bear that in mind as we dive into his explanation of how you should relate to the message of there being no resurrection. So let's take a look at verse 32, my translation, where it says, "What advantage is it to me if, as men say, I fought wild beasts in Ephesus if the dead are not raised?" So there's lots of goodies in here. I want to break it into two chunks. Let's look in Koine at the first chunk. E kata anthropon, ephereoma kesa, en Epheso, ti moi to ophalos, pardon me. And then the last little phrase, e nekroi uk egerontai. So let's start at the beginning. If according to man, e kata anthropon, this introduces a figure of speech, a metaphor. If, as people say, I fought wild beasts in Ephesus. So it introduces that metaphor, this figure of speech, and it's a way of signaling to your audience, I'm about to use a figure of speech, kata anthropon. So if we think about the names of the four Gospels, the Gospel of Mark is called kata Markon. The Gospel of Luke is kata Lukon. According to Mark, according to Luke, kata anthropon, according to man. The way men say it. So this introduces a metaphor. E kata anthropon, if according to man, ephereoma kesa, I have fought wild beasts in Ephesus and Epheso. So he's telling us that the fighting wild beasts is a metaphor. The wild beasts in question aren't wild beasts. They're men who act like wild beasts. They're vicious, vile opponents. It's a pretty interesting word, and we're going to actually use Wednesday's word of the week this week to unpack that word more fully. So take a look on Wednesday for the word of the week number 22, where we will fully unpack this once used word that means I fought wild beasts or I was made to fight wild beasts. So that's the figure of speech. If, as men say, I fought wild beasts in Ephesus, then he tells us, timoi toophilos, what advantage is it to me? What good would it be for me to fight wild beasts in Ephesus? And then we get the last nugget, e nekroi uk egerontai, if the dead are not raised. If there's no resurrection, why am I banging my head against the heads of these wild men, these wild beasts in Ephesus? It's all pointless if there's no resurrection. But yet you've heard that I've struggled mightily with the opponents of Christianity in Ephesus. So let's move on and look at the next chunk in the verse, which is a direct quote from the Septuagint from Isaiah chapter 22. And he says there in the quote, and it's structured as poetry, as it is in Isaiah, phagomen kai tiomen, arion gar apothneskomen. So phagomen kai tiomen, let us eat and let us drink. Why? Oriongar, for tomorrow, apothneskomen, we die. Let us eat and let us drink, for tomorrow we die. So the first two, phagomen kai piomen, are hortatory subjunctives, or another term for hortatory subjunctives are volative subjunctives. Let's think about the cognates for hortatory and volative. So hortatory is a cognate of exhort or exhortation, to encourage someone to do something. Just like volative is a cognate of volition, the exercise of your will, or voluntary, doing something that you wish to do or you willingly submit to do. So a hortatory subjunctive or a volative subjunctive encourages someone to do something. Here, the things being encouraged, let us eat and let us drink. Why? Oriongar, for tomorrow, apothneskomen, we die. So what we see here is an appeal to sort of a nihilistic lifestyle in the context of there being no resurrection. Whereas we're all as good as dead. Any day now, your day is going to come. We're all going to die. We might as well embrace revelry. We might as well throw ourselves into eating and drinking, because almost echoing Ecclesiastes, in the end, the same fate awaits us all. We might as well eat and drink and be merry, right? So Paul's not encouraging that. Paul's using it as the consequent thought if, in fact, there is no resurrection. If there's no resurrection of the dead, I've wasted my life evangelizing. I've wasted my energy banging heads with wild beasts, quote, wild beasts, in Ephesus, and we might as well just eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Now, tomorrow we die, interestingly enough, the we die part is in the present tense, being used to indicate a future event. That's not that uncommon, but why would he do it? And how do we know it's a future event? Oriongar, for tomorrow. Tomorrow is always in the future. Tomorrow is never in the past, right? And today isn't tomorrow. Today is today. Tomorrow hasn't come yet. That's why we call it tomorrow. So it's something that's coming in the future, but then he uses the present tense, apothneskomen, we die. Why does he use a present rather than the future? Because the future tense is always inceptive. It's always describing the beginning of something that hasn't happened yet. It's still in the future. But the present tense tends to indicate something that's continual or ongoing. So if there's no resurrection, we might as well eat and drink, because tomorrow, the thing that's coming for us in the future is ongoing death. Unending death is coming for us if there is no resurrection. So if the dead aren't raised, we all face the same fate, and it's a never-ending, ongoing, perpetual death. Today might not be your day, tomorrow might not be your day, but a day is coming when it is your day, and death awaits us all. Therefore, might as well live it up, is the argument if there is no resurrection. Let's move on to verse 33, again my translation. Do not be deceived, bad companions destroy good morals. Let's look at it in Koine. Me planaste. We've seen this me planaste before. It introduces a Stoic slogan. The Stoic philosophers used me planaste to introduce an instructive phrase. Me planaste, do not be deceived. Phaerusen ethe, cresta homilie kakai. So, do not be deceived, me planaste. Let's take them one chunk at a time, one word at a time. Phaerusen, they destroy. Who destroys? We've got to go to the last two words in the phrase. They're in the nominative case. They're the subject of the verb. Homiliai kakai. Companions evil. Bad companions destroy. What do they destroy? Ethe cresta. Ethe cresta. Ethe comes from ethos, your ethics, your morals. Christa, good. So good morals are destroyed by whom? By bad companions. So if we were to go back to the previous verse, that kata anthropon, when he said, according to man, if I were to use an earthy human metaphor, lie down with dogs, get up with fleas. Paul here uses this Stoic slogan and says, bad companions destroy good morals. Why does that matter? Because if you hang out with the wrong people, you're going to buy into the notion, let us eat, let us drink, for tomorrow we die. No point to not living it up. Death is coming for us, and after all, there's no resurrection. There's nothing beyond death. You might as well party today while you can. So, there's a great clue to whether or not this is the point in verse 34. I'm just going to read it from the ESV. Wake up from your drunken stupor. Let us eat and let us drink, for tomorrow we die. Wake up from your drunken stupor, as is right, and do not go on sinning, for some have no knowledge of God. Be careful who you hang out with. Some have no knowledge of God. Lie down with dogs, get up with fleas. There are some out there who would advocate to you that there is no resurrection, and before you know it, you're going to embrace that nihilism that says, might as well just eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. And I say this to your shame, Paul ends the verse with. So Paul, in his life after his conversion on the road to Damascus, has a twofold ministry. The first part is evangelizing the Greek world, the Gentile world. The second part is fighting against pernicious influences within the church. Influences that introduce Gnosticism, that introduce nihilism. There is no resurrection. The best you can hope for is to eat and drink and be happy before your final dirt nap comes. You might as well live it up. And he's constantly struggling to get the young fledgling church to fight off these pernicious influences. And he does it here. Wake up from your drunken stupor. Don't listen to the people telling you eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, because in fact, there is a resurrection of the dead. If there wasn't a resurrection of the dead, then Christ isn't raised. And if Christ isn't raised, we're all still dead in our sins. And if that would mean that our preaching is pointless, my arguing with the wild beasts in Ephesus is of no advantage to me or anyone else, because there's no future. We're all still dead in our sins and to be pitied above all men. Powerful stuff. Read 1 Corinthians chapter 15 in its entirety and see Paul's argument in full, the magnificence thereof, and come back on Wednesday where we'll further unpack this notion of Paul fighting wild beasts in Ephesus. And until then, charis kai reina humin, grace and peace to you. If this was good for you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.